morning, everybody. We'll call to order this formal hearing on November the 16th, 2012 for the Alarm Systems Contractors Board. We have a roll call. Judge, do you want to call the roll? Or do you want us to? Okay. Stephen Tucker. Mr. Tucker is not here on the record with that. Keith Harvey.
Here.
Kenzie Roberts.
Here. Karen
Jones. Here. And I'll give you the fixes. That's what we have.
You have a copy of the notes? Yes, sir. Members of the board, Mr. Joseph is handing you a copy of the notice of hearing and charges. Why don't we just stand in recess for a moment while we'll review these charges and what you wrote down. Systems Contractors Board to consider the matter of Executive Electrical Inc. doing business as Executive Secretary, Executive Security Services, and Executive Electrical Services Inc. My name is Tom Stovall, and I have been assigned by the Secretary of State to be the administrative judge at this hearing. As the administrative judge, I will not participate in the decision that is made on the merits of this case. That decision will be made by the members of the board that are present this morning. Now, the members of the board have already identified themselves for the record. However, I will make all rulings of evidence, law, and procedure under the authority granted me by the Tennessee Administrative Procedures Act. Members of the board are advised that their decision in this matter must be based only upon the record that is produced during the course of these proceedings this morning. Failure to abide by this instruction could result in the matter being reversed or remanded back to the board for further consideration should it be appealed to Chancery Court. But also ask the board at this time if any of the board members, after reviewing these notice of hearing and charges, has any prior knowledge about this matter, or if any board member has received any ex parte communications concerning this matter. The record in this case, obviously, Mr. Jesse Joseph, Assistant General Counsel with the Department of Commerce and Insurance, is present on behalf of the department. The respondent is not present, and nor is the respondent represented by counsel in this matter. I want to go through the record that I have at this point, and then I'm going to let Mr. Joseph address what I assume is going to be a motion to hold the respondent in default. The notice of hearing and charges, which the board has reviewed, was filed on July the 16th of 2012. On September the 11th of 2012, the state moved for a continuance of the hearing. It was originally set for the 21st of September, I believe, by order of October the 3rd. An order was issued after the fact that the hearing in September was continued. I entered that order on October the 3rd and mailed my order granting that continuance to the two addresses that we had on record that had been supplied by the department. One to a Mr. Edward Whalen at 2012 Delaware Drive, Knowlesville, Tennessee, and the other to Executive Electrical, 10401 Courthouse Road, Spotsylvania, Virginia. Both of these orders came back to my office as unclaimed. On October the 4th, Mr. Joseph filed a notice that of his attempts to serve the previous notice of hearings to the respondent. And on October the 31st, Mr. Joseph filed a notice of intent to introduce affidavits in this matter. And on November the 5th, Mr. Joseph filed a motion to deem service of the notice complete and sufficient, and as there was not sufficient time to, by statute, the respondent has 7 days to respond to any motion, and there wasn't adequate time to give him 7 days and then file a written order. So I advised Mr. Joseph by email on 13th, unless I heard something from the respondent, then I would grant his motion. And as of today, I have not heard anything from the respondent, so I am granting Mr. Joseph's motion to deem the service complete in this matter. And then finally, on November the 9th, Mr. Joseph filed a motion to be allowed to take the testimony of one of the witnesses by telephone, and I am granting that motion. I believe the witness is living in Virginia and is beyond the reach of subpoena in this matter. So with that stated for the record, Mr. Joseph, did you have any further comments you want to make on what I assume is going to be your motion to hold the respondent in fault?
Yes, Your Honor. Briefly, Your Honor, on the basis of the motion that we filed to deem service of process complete and sufficient, and the entirety of the record, including the affidavit of Frankie Kieran, which is attached to that motion, we will submit that the respondent's inability to be served and the efforts of the state meet the requirements of the Secretary of State's rules relative to service of process. The state's tried 5 or 6 different times, tried to serve him personally here in Tennessee at his last known address. We've not been successful. Based on all those factors, the state would contend that the respondent should be held in default because of his failure to appear, his evasion of service for all practical purposes. And pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 45309, we would request that the respondent be declared in default and that the state be allowed to proceed in this matter as if it were not contested.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Members of the board, I have determined that service is sufficient in this matter, and I will turn it over to you to determine whether or not you wish to grant the motion to hold the respondent in default and allow Mr. Joseph to proceed, or whether or not you wish to deny that motion and continue it to the next meeting and instruct Mr. Joseph to make further attempts to communicate with the respondent. Madam Chair.
Make a motion to assume it would be best to do that by motion, so I make a motion to assign the respondent in default.
Second. Okay. We have a motion and a second to find this respondent in default. All in favor, voice by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
All right, very good. Mr. Joseph?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to make a brief opening statement and
Go
also
ahead.
indicate on the record that my opening will be brief. I have asked the listed witness from the state of Virginia, Mr. Seal, who is in Fredericksburg, Virginia, by the way, to call in to the Hollycomb Watts line at 9:30 a.m. today in order to take his proof out of order because he is employed in the state of Virginia and this is the most convenient time in order to take his testimony. We'd also ask the permission in Your Honor's discretion, given the fact that the state has already pre-numbered and pre-marked certain exhibits, and I did not know until after that had been done that I would need to take Mr. Basil's testimony first, that we be allowed to take, at least temporarily, some exhibits out of order, and I will make them up as we go along, if that could be done. But in any event, members of the board, good morning. This notice of hearing and charges involves 3 corporations, which are all 100% owned by a gentleman by the name of Edward F. Whelan IV. Those 3 corporations are Executive Electrical, Inc., which is the entity that has a Tennessee Alarm Systems Contractor Certificate. The second company is Executive Electrical Services, Inc., which is a Virginia corporation, or had been a Virginia corporation, engaged in the practice of alarms, security, and contracting work in the state of Virginia. And the third corporation is named Executive Security Services, Inc., also a Virginia corporation involved in alarm systems contracting work in the state of Virginia, as is set forth on the caption of the notice of hearing and charges. The state's proof in this matter, members of the board, will show that the respondent, Executive Electrical, Inc., was chartered in Tennessee in June of 2005 and that it was granted an electrical contractor's license in August of 2005 by the Board of Licensing Contractors of this department. The respondent applied for, after that point, an alarm systems contractor certificate from this board in January of 2007. And this application was granted on February the 8th, 2007 in the burglar alarm classification. The respondent's certification expired on February 28, 2009. The respondent's first DQA, as listed on its application, was Raphael E. Pagan. The proof will also show that Mr. Pagan notified the board staff on December 4th of 2007 of his resignation of employment that day with the respondent, but the respondent never submitted its own notice of termination with this board as is required. Moreover, it will be shown that the respondent did not employ a substitute designated qualifying agent within 30 days after Mr. Pagan's termination, or by January 4th, 2008. And the respondent did not request an extension of time of up to 90 days in order to employ a replacement designated qualifying agent. The record will reflect that the executive director sent certified mail correspondence to the respondent on February 25th, 2008, informing the respondent that the respondent's alarm systems contractor certification was placed in invalid status due to the lack of a designated qualifying agent, and that the staff never received any response to this correspondence from the respondent. Further, we will show that between January and December of 2008, for that 12-month period, while the respondent's alarm systems certification was in inactive status or invalid status, Mr. Whelan continued to do business in Tennessee as an alarm systems contractor by sending his Virginia Corporation employees to Tennessee to install and program alarm systems in many homes, more than 300, in the Lake Providence subdivision of Wilson County, which was being built by Pulte Homes. The proof will show that Mr. Whelan was utilizing the respondent company and his two Virginia companies interchangeably. That as of the initial application for certification as an alarm systems contractor, which the respondent filed, the respondent provided the same corporate headquarters address for the respondent, as was the case for his two Virginia companies, and he used letterhead stationery within his application from one of the Virginia companies. Further, our proof will show that one of the supervisors of the respondent's companies in Virginia considered that the respondent directed the operations of all three of his security companies as if they were operating as one, referring to them as the Tennessee office of the Tennessee division or the Virginia office and the Virginia division. It will also be proven that the respondent's Board of Licensing Contractors electrical contractor's license expired on July 31st, 2009, and that the respondent did not ever apply to this board for an exclusion from the Tennessee Alarm Systems Contractors Law under Tennessee Code Annotated 6232-3057. Finally, the proof will show that none of the four individuals which Edward F. Whelan was utilizing in Tennessee in 2008 to install and to program alarm systems in the Pulte Home subdivision in Wilson County, none of those four individuals were registered as employees with this board as required. Those four individuals, as stated in the notice of hearing and charges, are Philip Doobie, Toby McIntosh, Richard Dietz, and Trip Martini. At the conclusion of all of the proof, the state would ask the board to assess civil penalties against the respondent in the amounts of $1,000 per month for the first category of major violations of engaging in the business of an alarm systems contractor without having a qualifying agent in its employ, and for allowing the respondent doing business as Executive Security Services, Inc., out of Virginia, to do alarm contracting business in Tennessee without that Virginia company ever having a certification for a 12-month period. These are violations of Tennessee Code annotated 6232-304 A, B, C, H, and J at the rate of $1,000 per month for a total of $12,000 in this category. And insofar as the second major classification of violations, the state would request that the board assess civil penalties in the amount of $400 per month for the major violation of working for unregistered individuals in an alarm systems contracting work at the rate of $100 per month per individual between January and December of 2008, 12 months, for a total of $4,800 of civil penalties in this category. In sum, the state would ask the board in its judgment at the conclusion of all the proof in this matter to assess civil penalties of $16,800 against the respondent and assess all investigatory and hearing costs against the respondent incurred by the state herein, which would include the cost of the court reporter and of the Administrative Procedures Division of the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. You want to, we've got about 5 minutes. We have somebody else you want to run in here, witness?
Our staff has to call in to the phone number in about 3 minutes so it can be activated. And my next witness, who is Ms. Best, would be relatively lengthy.
All right, let's just wait.
It might be easier to do that right now. I'm gonna hand you that list of witnesses. In fact, I gave you. I'll tell you when they'll Right, I'm going to stay. Absolutely, I'm not asking you to do that. Wasn't expecting you to have to. That's all right. And they're going to be coming in order in just a moment.
And they're good at more down there right now.
points, and this is just thrown. It's kind of, I'm a little confused right now. You got everything.
Yes, this is Justin.
Hi, Justin. We're in the hearing, if you can hold for just a moment.
No problem.
Good morning, Justin.
Good morning.
You ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll have to go back on the record. If the witness would raise his right hand to be sworn by the court reporter, please.
Sir, can you tell me if your right hand is raised? Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you have your right hand raised?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
You can put your hand down, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Joseph.
Good morning, sir. Could you please state your full name for the record and speak up for the board members and the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Justin John Basile.
And Mr. Basile, what is your mailing address, sir?
3278 Bethel Church Drive, Woodbridge, Virginia, 22192.
You still there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the respondent in this matter, Executive Electrical Incorporated, sir?
Yes, sir.
And how are you familiar with the respondent, sir?
I work for Executive Electrical Services in Virginia, which is a company that the owner owns as well.
Do you know Edward F. Whelan IV?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know Mr. Whelan?
He was my boss. He owned the companies.
Are you familiar with two additional security companies in Virginia which Mr. Whelan has some involvement with, which are named Executive Electrical Services, Inc. and Executive Security Services, Inc.?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with these two companies?
I worked for Executive Electrical Services,
All right.
Inc. in Virginia.
And how long did you work for Executive Electrical Services, Inc. in Virginia?
About 3 years, from 2005 to 2008.
And what was your job title, sir?
I started out as just a worker, supervisor to, by the time I left in 2008, I was the lead supervisor, head of all operations out of the electrical services out of Virginia.
What did you actually do for Executive Electrical Services, Inc.?
I was lead supervisor up in Virginia. I also did some work down in Tennessee on some electrical projects that he had and stuff like that.
And what was the nature of the work you were performing in the state of Tennessee?
The work that I performed was all electrical work. I performed all electrical work.
All right. Did you have involvement with the respondent Executive Electrical, Inc. with respect to their Tennessee electrical contractor's license?
Yes, I was their qualifying agent at the end. Exact dates I'm not sure, but it was at the end of 2008 when I left. I was my qualifying agent from them.
Have you prepared an affidavit in this matter which you signed on April the 23rd, 2009, which was then delivered to the state's investigator, Laurie Wilson Weaver?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a copy of that affidavit before you now, sir?
Yes, sir.
Is the content of your April 23rd, 2009 affidavit true and correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you sign that April 23rd, 2009 affidavit before a notary public?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would move into evidence as exhibit number 10 out of order, of course. The April 23rd affidavit of Justin Basile, the witness who is testifying right now.
Oh, I didn't enter it into the record.
Exhibit number 10. Thank you. All right.
Ms. Joseph, why don't we pause for a moment and let the board members review this brief exhibit, and then I'll let you continue.
Thank you. Mr. Basile will be right with you in just a moment.
No problem.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Joseph.
All right, Mr. Basile, you still with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Basile, when you refer within your affidavit, sir, to the Tennessee office and the Virginia office, please explain to the board what you mean.
Well, Edward Whalen opened up the executive electrical services in Virginia first, and then moved down to Tennessee, opened up a company down there so he can do work. Use basically the companies in conjunction, would use guys from the electrical and security from up in Virginia, would bring them down to Tennessee, have them do work down there when he needed it, and to show the guys that the new guys that he got down in Tennessee, how everything was done. And I believe he also, the Executive Security Services up in Virginia, also monitored all the accounts that we get down in Tennessee.
Did you know Raphael Pagan, who was the respondent's designated qualifying agent here in Tennessee under his alarm systems contractor certificate?
Yes.
Are you aware that in December of 2007, Mr. Pagan ceased serving as the respondent's designated qualifying agent in Tennessee?
Yes.
What was your understanding, sir, of the circumstances under which Mr. Pagan left employment with the respondent?
Him and Mr. Whaling got into quite a few disagreements, and it was basically Edward Whalen let him go, and he quit all in the same kind of conversation. It was not a pretty sight.
Did you ever come down to Tennessee and work on any of Mr. Whelan's electrical contractor work in Tennessee?
Yes.
What is your current role with Mr. Whelan's company?
I am no longer employed with him. I have my own company. I left him back in 2008.
What is your understanding of the status of Mr. Whelan's Virginia operations?
He does not have the business. He's supposedly working up here, not as executive electrical services. He is doing some other things. He's not executive services. Executive electrical services is no longer in business.
What do you know, sir, about Mr. Whelan's work in the Pulte Homes Lake Providence subdivision in Tennessee?
He did all the electrical work, security, and low voltage for all the homes, pre-wiring them and filing them out. And if the homeowner wanted to monitor the systems, he got assigned the monitoring contracts.
What company name was Mr. Whelan doing business under?
Executive Security Services, Inc. of Virginia.
And how were these Tennessee client accounts out of this subdivision in Tennessee billed and monitored during 2008?
They were billed and monitored through Executive Security in Virginia.
Who was Cynthia Page?
She was the receptionist, and she handled the accounts billing and collecting payments for those accounts.
Did you supervise her?
Yes, sir.
What do you know, Mr. Basile, about how Mr. Whelan was having the security components installed and programmed for these homes in Tennessee during 2008?
He had brought two guys down from Virginia that really had no experience doing it, Trip Martini, and then Toby McIntosh, and then he also had Richard Dietz and Philip Doobie, who were security guys up in Virginia out of Executive Security Services, come down, do some work, train them, show them how to do it, show them how to do installs, and how to write up all the paperwork.
Who were Richard Dietz and Philip Doobie again?
They were security guys that worked for Executive Security Services up in Virginia, and they were technicians of ours that we sent down to Tennessee to work on the homes and teach the guys down there how to install and program the systems.
Who gave you instructions to send Mr. Dietz and Mr. Doobie to Tennessee to do installs and programming?
Edward Whalen.
Who gave you instructions to send Mr. Dietz and Doobie to train Mr. McIntosh and Martini?
Edward Whalen.
What was your general understanding, Mr. Basile, of how the respondent was running all three of these security companies?
He was running them all in conjunction. He'd purchase and buy materials from each one of them, bring monies and interchange monies between them. If one was short, he'd just use them, take the money out of one company, put it into another company, and vice versa, and just would use all the guys and everything as one big company, just, I guess, billed separately.
And when again did you stop working for Mr. Whelan's companies?
November of 2008.
Do you know the current location of Edward F. Whelan IV?
I know he is in Virginia. Exact address I do not have on me. I could probably get it from some friends of mine, but I do not know exactly his address. But he is in Virginia.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Basile. I'm going to turn this over to Your Honor, and you may very well have some questions from members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Members of the board have any questions for Mr. Basile?
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Okay, we'll speak a little louder. Listen for the questions when they come in.
Members of the board have any questions for Mr. Basile?
Okay.
Mr. Basile, was there, we've mentioned several different corporations But you have described the operation as being acting as a single entity. Is that correct understanding?
Yes. He basically used whatever money came in from one company. If another company was short, he would just transfer the money and basically use everything as one big company.
So basically there was no particular corporate identity other than as a group. Is that correct?
It was basically just the name differentiated them and their bank accounts, but he transferred money in and out of all the accounts to pay his bills and whatever else he needed. And the guys worked them all together doing one thing or another thing.
Mr. Basile, we're moving the telephone closer to the board members so everyone can hear better.
Okay.
Did everybody, I tell you what, we were moving around there, so would you repeat that last answer, please?
Yes, he basically used the companies all as one. He transferred money back and forth between all the companies, wherever he needed to pay his bills, and whichever company got paid, he would pay the bills out of that company or transfer the money in between. And each of the guys would basically work wherever he needed the work done, would do the work. If the low voltage guys were short-handed and he needed to bring an electrician to pull his wire, he'd have the electrician pull on the security wire or low voltage wire in a house. Whatever needed to be done, he did whatever he had to do to get it done.
Do you have any idea of how many alarm systems were installed here in Tennessee?
Oh, I know they were pre-wiring and I believe doing basic installs for most of the houses in Tennessee. As far as find accounts monitoring, I do not know. I don't know either way, but I know there was probably a couple hundred installs, and I don't know how many actual signed up.
Do you know if those alarm accounts are still active? Are they still being monitored by one of the entities that we've discussed here?
From my understanding, all of his companies are out of business.
Do you know what happened to these people that signed on for the alarm services to be monitored and such?
I do not, sir. I left and he started going down, lost his Virginia office, and then lost his Tennessee office, I believe.
Mr. Basile, this is Vivian Hickson, and I have one question for you. In your affidavit, it says the two main installers in Tennessee were Toby McIntosh and Trip Martini. Were these employees of one of the companies that Mr. Wheeler owned?
I believe they were employees of Executive Electrical in Tennessee. They were not employees of Executive Security Services up in Virginia or Executive Electrical Services up in Virginia. I believe they were both employees in Tennessee. Toby McIntosh, I believe, lives down in Tennessee. Trip Martini was a friend of his that he moved down to Tennessee for some time to do some home security work.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah. Mr. Basile, this is Karen Jones, and I have one question. I want to try and summarize this for you, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I see that they were registered or licensed from 2005 till 2008 with company 1296. Hagan was a DQA with QA 1243. You worked for them, but you weren't a QA, correct?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't hear that.
You worked for them, but you were not a QA, is that correct?
I worked for him, and then when Daniel Sigmund left the company, he took his qualifying agent from Tennessee, so then I went ahead and did the qualifying agent down in Tennessee for him.
And then back to the teachers, I'll call them Trip Martini and Toby McIntosh. They brought Philip Dew and Richard Deeks and showed them how to do it as if they were registered employees, but they weren't.
They were registered and had all their paperwork and stuff up in Virginia. Richard Deeks and Philip Doobie. In Virginia, they were security techs that were had everything they needed. As far as in Tennessee, I know they did not do anything as far as registering down in the state of Tennessee.
Okay, so there's 4 unlicensed. And then we have Cynthia Page, who handled the paperwork and faxed the contracts to Virginia to be monitored. Or she was in Virginia and faxed them.
Yeah, basically, she was in Virginia, and they would send the paperwork up to us to have files and everything like that, and she would handle that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Anything else from the board for Mr. Basile? Mr. Joseph, anything else?
Yes, Mr. Basile, I want you to clarify something that I thought I heard you just answer. When you just answered that you previously worked as a qualifying agent for Mr. Whelan, were you working under his alarm systems contractor license, or were you working under the electrical contractor's license that he had?
Only the electrical contractor's license.
You never were a qualifying agent with this alarm systems contractors board, were you?
No, sir.
Did you ever come down to Tennessee to do any alarm contracting work?
No, sir.
That's all.
All right. Anything else from this witness? No? Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Basile.
No problem. Have a wonderful day and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you. Let's take mine. Joseph,
Your Honor,
next witness.
sure. Could we, at this juncture, could I move, Your Honor has copies of all of our exhibits for the record. I'd like to move the admission of these exhibits and ask staff to distribute them to the board, so that the board can have the exhibits as we go forward.
That's fine. They've been previously marked. Exhibits 1 through 12 are part of the record, and they are being passed to the board. And I assume, Mr. Joseph, that you will identify each document as
Yes.
you get to it in your presentation.
I most certainly will.
Something filtered, it's not distributing. You turned it off yesterday, cleared it up, but it made noise. Okay, it's still up. God, where do I store it? 10. I got 9. I don't have a 10. I see you're fixing to hand out 11.
Yeah. No, I have 11 and 12.
We
Well, we
have,
already have 10, that's the alphabet.
Oh, the 10s will be handed out first. Okay. That's the affidavit you went over.
oh, this thing, okay. I had it flipped
There
over.
is 11.
That's where I got all my notes. What's our number one?
It's affidavit of Frank Kieran.
Oh, did we renumber it to one? No, exhibit 1.
That's a different one. Oh, the seal was 10. This is
Yeah, but
another
here-
affidavit.
We have at this
Here comes
point 2 through 12.
Okay, one's coming right here.
Stuck in traffic, on the way.
There we go. Okay. Great, yep.
Your Honor, I'd like to just go through these briefly and just identify them for members of the board. Exhibit number 1 is, of course, the affidavit of the investigator, Frankie Kieran. Board members should have that. Exhibit number 2 is a printout from the Tennessee Secretary of State's Office Business Entity Detail and a Business Entity Verification printout for Executive Electrical Inc. Exhibit number 3 is a Virginia Secretary of State Business Entity Detail printout for Executive Electrical Services, Inc. Exhibit number 4 is a Virginia Secretary of State Business Entity Detail printout for Executive Security Services, Inc. Exhibit number 5 is the application that the respondent filed with this board staff to become certified as an alarm systems contractor. Exhibit 6 is a Department of Commerce and Insurance's Verified Tennessee License Verification printout for the respondent's Board of Licensing Contractors Electrical Contractors License. Exhibit number 7 is a February 25th, 2008 notice letter from the department to the respondent indicating that the certification was placed in invalid status. Exhibit number 8 is a May 8th, 2009 affidavit of Cody Vest regarding the respondent Executive Electrical Incorporated. Exhibit 9 is a May 8th, 2009 affidavit of Cody Vest regarding Executive Security Services Incorporated. Exhibit 10 is the April 23rd, 2009 affidavit of Justin Basile. Exhibit 11 are certified miscellaneous contractual documents between the respondent that were signed by Mr. Whelan and Pulte Homes between December 2006 and July 2007, and Pulte Homes' open payable reports reflecting its payment of invoices to respondent through December 2008. Exhibit number 12 is a compilation from the Tennessee Comptroller of Treasury's Real Estate Assessment Data website, which is a real estate assessment data listing for the Lake Providence subdivision in Wilson County, Tennessee for tax year 2009. So you should have all of those exhibits before you. At this point, Your Honor, we would like to call as our next witness Ms. Cody Bass.
All right, Ms. Best. Raise your right hand, please, ma'am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Could you please state your full name for the record, please, ma'am?
Cody Best.
And what is your business address, Ms. Best?
It's 500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee, 37243.
And what is your title in the department, ma'am?
I'm Executive Director for the Alarm Systems Contract.
How long have you been an employee of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance?
This is my 20th year.
How long have you served as director for this particular board?
4 years.
As executive director, are you the official custodian of all the licensing, certification, and complaint files of this board?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the respondent in this matter, Executive Electrical Inc.?
Yes.
Please explain to the board how you are familiar with Executive Electrical Inc.
They made an application in 07. They were issued a license. They expired, I believe, not looking at anything, expired in 09. And we have received a complaint, and the complaint has been filed against them.
And when was the respondent first certified as an alarm systems contractor in Tennessee?
They made the application January of 07.
Excuse me, Your Honor. I'd like my witness to have copies of all of those exhibits that are testimony and evidence.
Here, why don't you use these right here?
There is an extra over here.
Thank you.
5 through 12.
Okay. Thank you. Now, according to exhibit number 5, Mrs. Best, which you have in front of you, which is the respondent's application to become certified as an alarm systems contractor, when was that application filed with your office?
January the 9th of 07.
And when did your office grant the respondent its initial certification as an alarm systems contractor?
That I don't have the exact date when that was issued.
But according to your recollection, when was it issued?
It was issued in 07.
Do you see on the first page of Exhibit 5 a handwritten date of February 8th, 2007?
Yes, I do.
And what would that date designate to you?
That's where a staff member has written the date, and I would assume that would be the date that the license was actually issued.
Do you have any other information that would lead you to believe that the license was not issued on that date?
No, sir.
Okay. Does that date sound legitimate to you? February 8th, 2007?
Yes, sir.
Okay. According to exhibit number 5, who was listed on this application as the respondent's president and owner?
Edward Whelan IV, president.
And what was Mr. Whelan's ownership interest of the respondent according to this application?
says that he's the principal owner.
What percentage?
President.
What percentage does he own?
Okay, just give me a minute here.
Page 2 under
I got
interest
it.
held.
Okay, interest held. Other ownership down here at the bottom. Says it's interest held. Down at the bottom under number 5, it says 100%.
And according to exhibit number 5, Ms. Best, who was listed on this application as the respondent's designated qualifying agent?
Raphael E. Pagan. Pagan.
What was the respondent's office location in Tennessee according to this application?
2012 Delaware Drive, Nolensville, Tennessee 37135.
And what was the classification for which the respondent was granted an alarm systems contractor license?
Burglar alarms.
What is Mr. Pagan's qualifying agent number?
1243.
Now, looking at numbered item number 4 on page 2 of this application, which is exhibit 5, does the respondent indicate that it has any other licenses or certifications in Tennessee? Exhibit 5, page 2.
I thought you said exhibit 4.
Exhibit 5, page 2, item 4.
Oh, I'm sorry, misunderstood you. I thought you were for the exhibit. Oh, item number 4. Item number 4 on this application says contractors license number 55413.
Now, looking at exhibit number 6, ma'am, what is the respondent's contractor's license number on this printout, which is exhibit number 6?
55413.
Is this the same license number that you saw in the respondent's alarm systems contractor application?
Yes.
As a licensed electrical contractor, did the respondent, Executive Electrical Incorporated, ever apply with your office for any exclusion from the provisions of the Tennessee Alarm Systems Contractors Law?
No.
And was the respondent ever granted any exclusion from the provisions of the Tennessee Alarm Contractors Licensing Law as an electrical contractor?
No.
Look with me, Ms. Best, to exhibit number 7. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
All right. And what is that document?
It's a document from our office dated February the 25th, 2008 to Mr. Edward Whelan, Executive Electrical Incorporated, and the basic letter is telling him that his designated qualifying agent has been terminated. Well, we became aware that his designated agent is no longer employed.
And what else does that letter tell the respondent?
It tells them that we put their license in an invalid status, that they can notify the office and they can ask for an extension.
And what is
to
your
replace the qualifying agent.
All right. What is your understanding of what the respondent is allowed to do as an alarm systems contractor when its certification has been placed in invalid status?
They have to cease and desist all activity.
All right. Did your office ever receive any response from the respondent to this February 25th, 2011, which is exhibit number 7?
I have no record of that.
according to your office's understanding, what was the effective date in which Raphael Pagan ceased to be the designated qualifying agent for respondent?
His affiliation was terminated with the company on December the 4th, 2007.
Based on that information, when would be the effective date when the respondent's alarm certification became invalid?
December the 4th, 2007.
Does the respondent not have 30 days after December the 4th in order to obtain a substitute designated qualifying agent?
Yes, sir, they have 30 days to notify us.
So what would 30 days from December 4th, 2007 be?
January the 4th, 2008.
So January 4th, 2008 would be the date in which their certification became effectively invalid, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want you to look again with me to exhibit number 5. According to documents within exhibit number 5, the remainder of the documents, do you find any letterhead correspondence from the respondent's Virginia companies?
I have a document here, yes, sir, that says Executive Electrical Services Incorporated.
And what was the mailing address in Virginia which the respondent stated was his corporate headquarters?
10401 Courthouse Road, Suite 8, Spotsylvania, Virginia 22553.
And this is the same address you find on that letterhead correspondence?
Yes, sir.
Now, after the complaint was opened in this matter, sometimes in the spring of 2009, have you conducted any further search to determine whether the respondent had any alarm systems contractor certification, or whether Edward F. Whalen IV had submitted any application to become a registered employee or to become a QA?
Yes, sir, I did an affidavit.
Turn with me to exhibit number 8. Do you have that?
Yes.
And what was the results of your research according to exhibit number 8?
It says that this affidavit is for Executive Electrical Incorporated. Says at this time that does not hold a current alarm contractors company certification.
And what do you also state within this affidavit relative to your research regarding Edward F. Whelan IV?
This office has no record of an application being submitted for alarm employee registration or alarm qualifying agent license for Mr. Edward F. Whelan.
According to exhibit number 9, you also conducted research regarding Executive Security Service Incorporated, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what were your findings within exhibit number 9, which is your affidavit regarding Executive Security Service Inc.?
It does not hold an alarm contractors company certification.
Ms. Vest, when did the alarm systems contractor certification that your company granted to this respondent in February 2007, when did that certification expire?
It expired in February of 09.
What date in February of 09? that have been the end of the
That
month?
would be all our licenses expire the last day of each month.
That would have been February
February
28,
28.
2009.
Yes, sir.
Was the respondent ever granted a late renewal of this certification?
No, sir, I don't have a record.
Has the respondent ever been granted a new license as an alarm systems contractor after the end of February of 2009?
No, sir.
Now, after the termination of Mr. Pagan on December the 4th of 2007, did the respondent ever submit to your office its own notice of termination form regarding Mr. Pagan's termination as qualifying agent?
No.
Have you ever heard of the names which appear before you in Exhibit number 10, the affidavit of Justin Bastille? Have you ever heard of the names of Richard Dietz, Philip Doobie, Toby McIntosh, or Trip Martini?
Not before looking at this affidavit, no, sir.
Have you ever, has your office ever registered any of those individuals as registered employees in the state of Tennessee?
No.
Have any of these individuals, to the best of your knowledge, Ms. Vest, ever applied for status as a registered employee in Tennessee?
Not with my office, no, sir.
No further questions of this witness, Your Honor, at this juncture.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Members of the board, questions for Ms. Vest?
I have one question. In exhibit number 5, which is the package for alarm contractor company certification, about the first third, it shows alarm contractor company certification roster of employees, and it appears to be signed by the Raphael Pagan as the DQA for the company. There's 3 people listed below there: 2 Christopher Chase, 3 Matthew Hall, 4 Edward and Wheeler. Were any of those people ever registered in Tennessee?
I have no record.
Okay, so what's listed here is not accurate, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Because I thought I heard you testify that Mr. Wheeler never submitted an application for a registered employee in Tennessee.
Correct.
That's all I have.
I have a question about Exhibit 7.
Find it. Just a second. I think I'm out of order here. Okay. I have it.
You notified him, Mr. Pagan, that his license was terminated. But if, at the paragraph at the bottom, if a written response to this correspondence must be filed within 14 days of your receipt of this letter, you testified that he had 30 days to renew. So he has 30 days to renew, but 14 days to reply.
To this letter, yes, to reply to this letter.
So it's really 30 days, not 14. I mean,
No, we gave him 14 days
To
to
reply.
reply to this letter.
But
Well,
30
here's
days
where we're,
to-
yes, up here we're quoting the statute, that he had 14 days to respond to us about what's going to happen here, and what is happening.
But he did not.
No.
Anything else for Ms. Vest? No? Robert's question?
I was just,
You look like you want to ask.
yeah, I was really trying to determine, it sounds like that after this last correspondence, Exhibit 7, well, I guess Exhibit 8, Exhibit 8 probably being the later date, dated in May of '09. Was there any correspondence with any of these entities or Mr. Whelan after May of '09? That appears to have been the last correspondence that was sent out, and actually there wasn't any response to that, was there?
So this is just after date, the last correspondence.
I was just trying to ascertain in my own mind when the communications back from Mr. Whelan and his entities ended. What was the last correspondence or communication we had back from Mr. Whelan or his entities? I guess that's the best way to ask the question.
I don't have anything but the application that they responded to. I don't have anything where they wrote back at that time. They made application. It was issued. I don't have any further correspondence from it.
And that was in '07.
Yes, sir.
Now, was there a notice of termination for Mr. The DQA? I'm trying to forget. That's his name. Was there any notice of his termination?
I believe it was Mr. Pagan. He's the one who told us, yes, that have that in front of me.
Because he left Mr. Whelan and his entities.
Yes. It was Mr. Pagan that said I left that, but I don't have any correspondence on it.
So I guess that would really be the last communication you had from Mr. Whelan or any of his entities.
Well, Mr. Pagan.
I guess technically Mr. Pagan at that point was not an employee of Mr. Whelan. Okay, I'm just trying to, we've got so many entities
Yes, sir.
and so many dates that I'm just trying to get it straight in my mind. Thank you.
All right, anything else for Ms. Best?
No,
Mr. Joseph?
no, you're right.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Keep those there.
All right.
Thank you.
At this juncture, Your Honor, the state will call as its next witness Lori Wilson Weaver.
Raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I did.
Morning. Could you please state your full name for the record, ma'am?
Laurie Wilson Weaver,
And what is your mailing address, Ms. Weaver?
500 James Robertson Parkway, Nashville, Tennessee 37243.
And what is your title with the Department of Commerce and Insurance?
Regulatory Board Investigator,
And how long have you served in that capacity, ma'am?
approximately 10 years.
And were you a Department of Commerce and Insurance employee before you became a Regulatory Board's investigator?
I was.
And what did you do before that?
I was a complaint coordinator for the Private Protective Services, Alarm Board, and Private Investigation Polygraph Commission.
How long did you serve in that capacity?
About 2.5 years.
Are you familiar with the respondent in this matter, Executive Electrical Incorporated?
I am.
And could you please explain to the board how you became familiar with this respondent?
I received a request for investigation in 10 March of 2009 that was assigned to me to conduct evidentiary investigation into the conduct of Executive Electrical, Inc. and Edward F. Wheaton.
And what did you understand the allegations of the underlying complaint against this respondent to have been?
To be unlicensed conduct.
Have you ever met Edward F. Whelan before?
I have not.
Did you ever attempt to locate Mr. Whelan during your investigation in this matter?
I made numerous attempts in Tennessee to contact Mr. Whelan at his listed residence, 2012 Delaware in Nolensville, and also at his business location, which was the 2007 Johnson Industrial Boulevard in Nolensville, Tennessee.
And you actually physically went to both of those locations looking for Mr. Whelan?
I went to each location numerous times to try to locate Mr. Whelan.
And what were you told by anyone who answered the door at this residence in Nolensville?
Each time I went to the residence, the family member indicated that he was not at home or he was out of town. I left several business cards at that location and never received a response from Mr. Whelan from any of those attempts.
And when were you conducting this investigation?
March, April, May time frame, 2009.
All right. Did you attempt to reach Mr. Whelan at the listed phone number that he listed on his alarm systems contractor's application?
I did.
And what was the results of that attempt?
I never was able to make contact.
Okay. Are you familiar with the names of two additional security companies in Virginia which Mr. Whelan had some involvement with? Executive Electrical Services, Inc. and Executive Security Services, Inc.?
That's correct. I identified that those were companies in Virginia that Mr. Whelan had interest in operating.
Did you ever contact the Cynthia Page, who was listed on the affidavit of Justin Basile, which is exhibit number 10? Did you ever contact Cynthia Page regarding her allegation?
That was my initial contact in the investigation. I contacted Ms. Page via telephone, and in that conversation, she indicated that she was aware of 4 to 7 homes in Tennessee that were being monitored at that time by Executive Security Services out of Virginia. And she also listed Mr. Basile as a witness in her complaint. She was the complainant in the case, as having additional information.
And you did contact Justin Basile as part of your investigation in this matter, correct?
Yes, I contacted him by telephone also.
And you obtained an affidavit from him?
Correct.
All right, that's been entered into evidence as Exhibit 10, correct?
Correct.
What role did you understand Mr. Basile to have in this matter?
He indicated that he was, and also I verified through the Contractors Board records, that he was the qualifying agent for the Executive Electrical Incorporated Electrical Contractors license.
And what were you told by Mr. Basile regarding the respondent's operations in Tennessee after Raphael Pagan left the respondent's employment?
That Edward F. Whelan continued to operate in Tennessee without benefit of a qualifying agent for the alarm certification.
Did you contact any representative of Pulte Homes in Tennessee as part of your investigation?
I did. Following my conversations with Cynthia Page and Justin Basile, I contacted Richard Gowrie, who was the construction manager for Pulte Homes at his offices in Maryland Farms.
And what were you told by the representative of Pulte Homes?
Mr. Gowrie indicated that Pulte Homes, in fact, had done considerable business with Executive Electrical in the construction of a number of homes in the Lake Providence subdivision in Wilson County, and that they had done the pre-wire electrical work plus the alarm pre-wires and installation of alarm systems in those homes.
And what was the period of time that Mr. Respondent had done this work in Cruelty Homes, Lake Providence subdivision in Wilson County?
The period of time that I have received records was from January 08 through December 08.
And you obtained, did you not, a copy of the certified contractual documents and amendments to contracts, as well as Cruelty Homes open payable reports for all of the work that they paid to Respondent or to Mr. Whelan's companies in Virginia, which has been entered into evidence as Collective Exhibit 11, did you not?
I did.
You obtained this information from Mr. Geary at Cruelty Homes?
That's correct.
As to these contracts and the amendments to the contracts, what company is listed as the contractor in this matter?
It's Executive Security Services Incorporated at 10401 Courthouse Road, Suite A, Spotsylvania, Virginia.
And this is one of Mr. Whelan's Virginia corporations?
It is.
What date do the open payables report, which are a number of pages, what dates does that run through?
They run from January 1st, 2008 through December 31st, 2008. The date on the report runs through 3/31/09, but that was the report production. But the actual dates for the invoices were terminated at December 2008.
All right. And what do these open payable reports tell you?
They indicate a number of invoices by date for specific lots in the Lake Providence subdivision where Executive Security Services, Inc. did installations of security systems, and according to Mr. Gary's affidavit, it was security system pre-wires, complete security systems, including keypads and sirens that were installed in these homes that were in construction.
You also did further research, did you not, from the state of Tennessee's control of the Treasury's website, and you pulled real estate assessment data for the Lake Providence subdivision in Wilson County in 2009, did you not?
I did.
And the results of the research that you obtained from the control of the Treasury's website has been admitted into evidence as Exhibit 12 for you, correct?
Correct.
Were you able to determine, based upon matching up the property addresses as listed on Exhibit 12 with and the lot numbers on Exhibit 12, along with the information that was included on the open payables report in Exhibit 11, to determine how many actual properties that the respondent installed and or pre-wired in this subdivision?
I did.
And what was the results of your research in that regard?
I calculated the number of invoices based on the lot numbers at 309 separate installations that were billed to Pulte Homes by Executive Security Services, Inc.
And did some of these lot numbers have multiple invoices?
Yes.
And what would that represent in your opinion?
That additional, probably the initial invoice was for the pre-wire and additional charges for the installation of the actual security equipment, keypads, the siren or other equipment for the security system.
You were able to identify, were you able to identify these specific property addresses from the information that was included within Exhibit 11 in the open payables report?
Yes, the lot numbers corresponded to the lot number in the real estate data assessment and provided a specific street address for each one of those installations.
What individual on behalf of Executive Security Services signed all these contractual documents with Pulte Homes?
They were signed by Ed Whelan.
When did you conclude your investigation in this matter?
In late April 2009.
Were you ever able to reach Mr. Whelan in any way during your investigation?
No, it wasn't.
Were you ever able to locate any credible phone numbers in the state of Virginia from Mr. Whelan?
No, it wasn't.
No further questions at this time.
Members of the board, questions for this witness?
He testified that Ms. Page was the initial complainant, but the affidavit come from Justin Basile, which...
I spoke with Ms. Page by phone and just gathered some basic information from her. And then I contacted Mr. Basile since he was more involved in the company.
And she was still employed by him at that time.
I assumed that she was. I couldn't tell you absolutely for sure that she was employed by Whelan at that time.
Is she the one that provided you Exhibit 11 and 12 about their financials?
No, Exhibit 11 came from Richard Gowrie, the representative for Pulte Homes.
Okay.
And then Exhibit 12 is an online resource that Tennessee Property Data, that I pulled myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Okay, thank you. Give me approval.
Your Honor, the state has no further proof in this matter.
All right, now members of the board, let's take a very short recess. Come back and closing argument.
Good idea.
Mr. Joseph, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Very briefly, members of the board, the state does believe that it's proven all of the allegations are set forth in the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law that we are going to distribute to you in a moment by preponderance of the evidence, and that the respondent has violated the provisions of law that we've set forth. However, by way of explanation, I simply wanted to inform the board that it certainly was not lost on the state that two of the entities that arguably engaged in or had some role in the unlicensed conduct in this matter, Executive Security Services, Inc. and or Executive Electrical Services, Inc., these two Virginia corporations, never had a Tennessee certification. And according to exhibits, let me make sure I get it right, and according to exhibits numbers 3 and 4, both of these Virginia entities, according to the Virginia Secretary of State, have been terminated. So therefore, the state did not believe that it was practical to open complaint files or to seek a judgment against a terminated entity in Virginia. Secondly, the record reflects that the state exhausted tremendous efforts in attempting to locate Edward F. Whelan IV, who is the owner of all three of the entities, and has been unsuccessful. Mr. Whelan never had a license issued by this state in his own right as a qualifying agent. He was never a registered employee. However, the named respondent in this case, Executive Electrical Inc., did have a Tennessee Alarm Systems Contractors license, or certificate rather, issued by this board, as well as an expired Board of Licensing Contractors license. Therefore, we thought it was prudent and practical to seek the judgment and to seek the relief against Executive Electrical, Inc., if any relief could be sought. And we just wanted to point that fact out. Secondly, as to the question of the requested civil penalty sought, the state is not wedded to the amounts that the state referred to. And leaves that firmly in the discretion of the board. The board may very well think it is far more serious than the civil penalty recommended by the state for one of the respondent companies, or one of the companies that was doing business as the respondent, to have installed or programmed over 300 homes in Lake Pulte subdivision in Wilson County. But based upon the lack of corporate existence of the Virginia companies, the inability to serve Mr. Whelan, and the total lack of any response or any information from the respondent other than the information that was able to be obtained by Ms. Wilson Weaver, or information that was provided to Ms. Best, which was minimal, the state made the civil penalty requests as set forth in our opening. But the state's certainly not wedded to those particular amounts. We leave that to the discretion of the board. With those explanations, the state would respectfully request the board to find in favor of the state, and to find that the respondent has violated the provisions of law that are included in the notice of hearing charges, and would again request the board to assess civil penalties as it deems appropriate, and assess the cost of the cause, including the cost of the Administrative Procedures Division and the cost of the court reporter against the respondent in your final orders.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Do you pass proposed findings to the board? Members of the board, let me make a few very brief comments to you as Mr. Joseph hands this proposed findings to you. It's your responsibility at this time to make a decision in this matter. That decision will become the final order of this board, which will contain findings of fact, conclusions of law, and determination of what, if any, penalty is appropriate should you determine that the respondent has violated any provisions of the law. The burden of proof is on the state to show by preponderance of the evidence that the factual allegations contained in the notice of charges are true. The burden of proof is also upon the state to show by preponderance of the evidence that the facts you find that have been proven to constitute a violation of the statute and or rules as set forth in the notice. Your decision in this matter must be based only upon the record produced during the course of these proceedings this morning. That the proceedings, of course, would be the witnesses you've heard, as well as the exhibits that have been passed to you. The state, Mr. Joseph, has prepared a document that has been handed to you for review, entitled State Proposed Findings of Fact and Conclusions of Law. This document is not to be considered as evidence, but it is merely the proposed order that the department has issued. As provided to you, I would suggest, for convenience during the course of your proceedings, that the board use these proposed findings as a guide during your deliberations. But you must make specific findings of fact as to the factual allegations contained on pages 1 through 4, going on to page 5 of these proposed findings. You, of course, are free to accept these findings as drafted in their entirety, or to reject them completely and come up with your own facts, or to make whatever modifications you deem appropriate after you make these findings of fact. You then go forward to your conclusions of law, and the state's proposed conclusions of law are set forth make specific determinations as to what factual allegations constitute a violation of the statute and/or rules as is set forth in this proposal. Should you find by your findings of fact and conclusions of law that the respondent has violated any or all of the provisions set forth in the notice of hearing and charges and in these proposed findings, you are then authorized to consider and impose whatever sanctions against the respondent you deem appropriate. In this case, as Mr. Joseph outlined in his opening remarks, that the state is asking for a total of $16,800 civil penalties. Your authority to assess civil penalties is set forth in paragraphs 4 and 5 on page 7, as well as the proposed judgment, which is set forth on page 7 and 8 of this proposed order. You, of course, are free to consider the state's recommendation should you determine that penalties are appropriate in this case, but you are, of course, in no way bound by what the state has proposed to you. As I stated in my opening remarks, I will not participate in a decision that is made on the merits of this case. However, I will be available to you for any, if you have any questions during the course of your deliberations, and I'll provide you whatever guidance I can during your deliberations. So if you have no questions for me at this time, I will turn over the chair.
in consideration of our findings of fact, do we have any comments that we'd like to consider before we try and put this into some form of motion?
I don't have any on this one.
Okay. Well, Madam Chairman, if I may, then I would offer a motion as to our findings of fact. And I generally follow some of the proposals that the state has put together. So I would make a motion that we accept these as our findings of fact. First, as of July 13th, 2012, the respondent Executive Electrical Incorporated is inactive Tennessee for-profit corporation whose charter is currently revoked due to deficiencies and delinquencies owed to Tennessee Department of Revenue. The respondent originally chartered in Tennessee in June of 2005, and its owner and registered agent is Edward F. Whelan IV. Mr. Whelan's last known and listed address with this department and the Secretary of State's Division of Business Services is 2012 Delaware Drive, Knowlesville, Tennessee 37135. Respondent was originally certified as an alarm systems contractor by this board on February the 8th of 2007. The burglar alarm classification, which was certification number C1296, burglar alarm classification only. Mr. Whelan was listed on the respondent's application as the respondent's owner. The respondent's DQA was Raphael E. Pagan with qualified agent license number 1243. Second, the respondent did have an electrical contractor's license issued by the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors on August 5th, 2005, but said electrical contractor's license expired on July 31st of 2009. However, the respondent did not apply for and has never been granted an exclusion from the provision of the Tennessee Alarm Contractors Licensing Law in accordance with Tennessee Code Annotated 6232-305, subparagraph 7. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 6232-304, subparagraph B, respondent's certification became invalid on January the 4th, 2008, which was 30 days after Mr. Pagan's registration of employment on December the 4th, 2007. Since the respondent did not ever employ a new designated qualifying agent or request an extension of time after Mr. Pagan's termination from employment, notice was sent to Mr. Whelan on February 28th of 2008. The respondent was not in compliance with Tennessee Code annotated requirements, which mandate that alarm systems contractor having its employee a qualifying agent, but no response was received. The respondent's certification remained in an invalid status until its expiration on February 28th, 2009. Number 4, according to the application of certification.
Mr. Roberts, it's probably not necessary for you to read the entire document. What I would suggest that you do is, if you have any modifications, you might point that out.
All right.
If you don't, then you might
that being the
just
case,
expedite it to just.
It'll be fine. And that being the case, I would include within my motion the written portions of the proposed findings of facts, paragraph number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, number 10. Number 11, I would state as follows. Based on the evidence available to the state in this complaint, Mr. Wheel and testimony by former employees of the respondent, Mr. Whelan directed the activities of all 3 of his security alarm services companies, 2 in Virginia and 1 in Tennessee, as if they were operating in unison or as one single entity. That would be my motion I would propose as to our findings of fact.
Second.
Okay, Okay.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the proposed findings of facts, one for 11 with a slight modification to number 11 as our findings of facts is adopted. All in favor, Elizabeth, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Now as to the conclusion of law. Does the board agree that the proposed conclusions of law contained in the state's proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law are applicable to this case?
Madam Chairman, believing that the conclusions of law as proposed by the state are appropriate, I would make a motion that we adopt the proposed conclusions of law, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as they have been proposed by the state as our conclusions of law.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts to adopt the proposed conclusions of law included in this document. Second. We have a second. All in favor, voice by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The third part of this is the civil penalties. There's also been a proposal by the state. The board would like to review those and accept or modify the proposed judgments. Concerns that we listed 4 other employees besides Mr. Begon. I'm sorry. It concerns me that in his initial application for alarm contractor, he listed himself and 2 other people as licensed employees with the state, although Ms. Best has testified that Mr. Chase, Mr. Hall, or Mr. Wheelan were ever registered with the state. I think it just continues to show the type of activity, illegal activity we have in the state.
Companies being dissolved and the penalties assessed $16,800 are fair, and we have reduced it to $12,000 for a minimum. I would make a motion that we concur with the council and pray that we get it.
We have a motion by Ms. Jones to adopt the proposed judgment by the state in the amount of $12,000 for engaging in the business of an alarm systems contractor without having in its employ a qualifying agent for executive security services between January and December 2008 at a rate of $1,000 per month times 12 months for a total of $12,448 for working 4 individuals as unregistered who were unregistered employees for 12 months at $100 per month per unregistered employee and to assess all costs associated with this hearing to the respondent. Mr. Harvey, you second?
Second for discussion. I don't think that she said that exactly right. She said a total of $12,000, total $16,800.
That is true.
Well, I said that the penalty was assessed at 16.8, and then we dropped it to just a minimum of 12.
Well, the total is free at 16.8. You want to add the 4 unregistered employees?
Yeah, I know. I started off with due to the companies being dissolved, and ended with we pray.
So are you suggesting that we reduce it from 16.8 to 12?
That was my motion.
To reduce it to 12.
I don't think we did it.
I don't think it matters if we did it or not. I think it's based on the proof that was presented today.
I would hope that we can make a payment plan with them if they contact us.
Just for discussion, I would rather see us leave it at where it's at a minimum, if not more.
Okay, let's go get down then. But he said he
Motion
should
is
vote
made,
it
seconded,
down.
you have to have the motion to amend. I would suggest something further. Listed on the application were 4 additional employees that were not mentioned by the state in the proposed penalty.
Well, actually, it's
State mentioned Doobie, Dietz, McIntosh, and Martini listed on the respondent's application were Pagan, Chase, Hall, and Wheelan as employees. Now, Mr. Pagan, we understand, was an employee up until
December
2000. That's when it was. Yeah, so he was in there for 1 year. So that would leave if
Pagan was the QA.
He was the
Yeah,
QA
Pagan was
for
the QA.
approximately 1 year, about 10 months actually.
Okay, so that would leave 3 other employees, Mr. Chase, Mr. Hall, and Mr. Wheelan, that were listed as employees and never registered. The period of time was that the company was licensed in Tennessee was some 26 months, if I did the calculation, January '07 to February '09. That would be some 26 months. If those employees, when they received an application of termination, but they were listed as employees, 3 employees for 26 months is going to be 78 employee months. If we added $100 a month for those, that would add another $7,800 to the for unlicensed employees or unregistered employees, to be correct, unregistered employees for the time that the company was in operation. And I personally feel like that should be added in there. So I would suggest, before we make an amendment, as we're discussing this motion, I would suggest that we add $7,800 based on that information.
I would agree.
You want to add that to your second with discussion?
So under section, paragraph B, add an additional $7,800 for,
4 employees, Chase, Hall, and Wheeler. If there seems to be an agreement on that, I will.
January 2007 to February 2009, for a total of 26 months.
26 months, 3 employees, $100 a month, would be $7,800.
With the 12.
If there seems to be agreement on that, and we'll formalize that, I would make a motion to amend Ms. Jones' previous motion to amend the $4,800 that would be included in her motion for Doobie, Deeds, McIntosh, and Martini. We increase that by $7,800, which would give us, which would make it a total of $12,600
Yes, sir.
for that particular item.
Okay, so the total for the first would be $12,000. The total for the second violation would be $12,600, and then assess all the investigative and hearing costs to the respondent.
That's correct.
That is your motion. We have a second. What do you want to add more to?
No, that's fine.
So we have a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the proposed judgment as modified.
That would modify her motion.
Okay.
My motion is to amend.
Okay, we're voting on now the motion to amend Ms. Jones's motion. All in favor, voice by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we're going to, we have an amended motion on the table. We have a first and we have a second, correct?
We have a motion
That is correct. This was been part of what you seconded. Yes. Okay. Now we have the amended motion which shows the proposed judgments. Motion by Mr. Mackenzie Roberts, seconded by Pete Harvey. All in favor, voice by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion amended carries.
Mr. Chair, just adopt the policy statement.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. The Alarm Systems Contractors Board on the 16th of November 2012 do find that these three entities, two in Virginia, one in Tennessee, at times working in the state of Tennessee, working from 2007 until the end of 2007 with a DQA, operating legally, however, with unregistered listed employees, continued working in the state without the benefit of a DQA, although notified by the state. We do find that these are all in violation of the policy rules and laws of the state of Tennessee.
Very good.
You may keep that motion, second, that statement is a policy statement.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the policy statement. All in favor, voice by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Further, we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.